Hello and welcome to Real Estate Today. My name is Ed Cox and my co-host is Maria Babicki, and we're both real estate agents here in Simsbury, and we have a very interesting show for you today, especially for those of you who are thinking about buying a home, people who are thinking about selling their home, and also people who are considering making changes at their home, because we're going to be talking to a building official here from Simsbury. So with that in mind, Maria, could you introduce our guest?
Sure.
And get the show started.
Sure. Our guest today is Henry Miga, building official with the town of Simsbury. Henry, thank you for coming to the show.
You're welcome.
Could we start with having you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I started out I went through college and got an undergraduate degree, wood science and technology with building materials as a minor. And went to work right after that up in upper state New York building high-performance buildings, energy-efficient homes that actually exceed what's required by today's standards, and that was back in 1982. So
wow.
it was good, a very good experience in that respect, and I got a lot of knowledge, and started up my own company after that, and then in 1989 became a building official. So it's been 26 years as a building official. So quite a long time, and it's kind of funny to think of myself as a senior building official. And as far as just the nuts and bolts qualifications, as I said, I had an undergraduate degree. I have also a master's in public administration and Connecticut State Building Officials License, and Casio with a zoning enforcement officials license or certification. And I also have something called a Master Code Professional license through the International Code Council. And International Code Council is a code writing agency that creates model codes for now all of the U.S., some of Canada, Mexico, and several other countries. And Connecticut adopts that code, and they give certifications. And out of that, this Master Code Professional is their top certification. You have to take a number of exams in order to do that, to get that. So that's kind of who I am and kind of where I came from. And
Well, we are lucky to have you here in town.
thanks.
Henry, what are the main responsibilities of your office?
Primarily, it's public safety for the built environment. And as far as residences go, most people are familiar that you need a building permit for additions and new homes and those types of things. So primarily it's public safety. All the building codes are set up to do just that, to create a safe built environment. And we kind of joke about it, and the building officials saying that we do our job best when nothing happens. And we're in charge of nothing. So when the wind blows and storms happen and nothing happens, that's a good thing for us. When earthquakes happen, nothing falls down, nothing shakes loose. And I don't mean to say that that's very, very little, but it's really important. And if I can take just a second on that, fire is one big part of buildings, and fire safety, means of egress, and how they're fireproofed, and fire resistance, and electrical systems, and making sure things don't catch on fire. And that's very important. From the perspective of, for instance, seismic design, and I'll just take a segue, it's underrated in how many people actually are saved by good seismic design. And an illustration is Haiti. When they had a very relatively small, by our standards, earthquake, hundreds of thousands of people died. We have that in California, and 2 people died of a heart attack. The built environment survived, and that's what building codes do, as they prevent things from happening, prevent people from having problems. The same thing with wind resistance, etc. And that applies to single-family homes more than ever. So that primary job also is record keeping, and you're most familiar with that from a real estate point of view, is that you rely on the town not only to keep the records so that you can reference them in sales and propose sales, but now with the new real estate law saying that you have to review those records to tell the people who are buying the home that there are open permits. And that creates an awful lot of business for us, we'll put it that way. We have a lot of activity just closing out old permits and taking new permits for things that never got permitted.
So the question is, a homeowner could come in and check what's in their file?
Absolutely, at any time. We would like to get those records digitized, but we haven't gotten there yet. But the files are open to anybody, and especially the homeowner.
I do know that when I've gone in and a house was built in 1959, and I asked to see the file, sometimes some of the old maps or things that might not be there, but anything that's current, I'm just amazed at what I can find in there. All the, where location is, the lay of the land and deck that's built, and I can see what sizes it was. I'm kind of surprised by that.
No question. And I think that the real estate agents, as well as mortgage companies, rely on the building department and building codes to basically say that they're going to be first lien holder and take responsibility for that property. And they want to have assurances that permits were taken, inspections were made, because it gives them a level of surety. And I'm sure you see that with some of the mortgage brokers almost requiring that permits be closed because they don't want to underwrite without them. So we haven't seen that as much in the past as we are now.
Right. I did see one time, and we spoke when we met before, is I went to a file of, actually it was in Granby, but a gentleman who was one of the officials for the Farmington Valley Health District, who probably helped write the book on what you were supposed to do. When I asked to pull his file because he was selling his home and my clients were buying, I opened the file and there was so much information. It was like an owner's manual for the home. We knew every single thing that had been done, and it was very valuable to the new homeowner. We had complete confidence in the way the house, and there were a couple inspection issues which we could actually go back to the person who did the work and contact them, and they could answer our questions. So a really good, complete file is very valuable to you when you go to sell it.
Sure. And to the buyer as well. I mean, they have that level of confidence in the home that comes with a nice, complete record, and also they know potentially what's missing. I mean, and that's okay too. Not all houses are built alike, and older homes have problems, and they exist, and that's okay. And I don't want to call it problems, but they're not built to today's standard, and they didn't have to be, and that's okay as long as you understand it.
How does a homeowner know what they need a permit for?
The easiest way to describe what you need a permit for is to describe what you don't need a permit for. And that's how it's described in the building code, is you need a permit for just about everything except. And the except are things like normal repairs. So if you're taking out the water closet and putting a new one in, then consider a repair. Cabinets and countertops, you can change those out because there really isn't a safety issue associated with those. Although I will give you an anecdote with regards to the cabinets. We do look at some of those things when we do inspections. One, I got called to a lady's house, and literally she said, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" And the entire top cabinets came off of the wall with everything in them, ruined all of her dishes. And that's more than several hundred pounds of things coming off of a wall aimed at you if you're standing there. So that is really a safety issue. So we do take a look at blocking in the walls, cabinet and fastening when we do inspections. So it's not something we ignore, but with regards to what you need permits for, general repairs you do not need to have. You're changing light bulbs, changing a small fixture, changing a faucet out. But anytime you actually change plumbing, the piping itself, anytime you add electrical, you either move it or then you do need to have a permit.
Okay, this sounds like a lot of responsibility. How many people are helping you in the office?
I have Colleen, who's the administrative assistant, is wonderful. I mean, she just does a phenomenal job. I have to give her kudos because I would not be able to concentrate on the things I have to concentrate without having that coordination and backup. We have one assistant building official for 7 hours a week. He helps out 2 afternoons. Jerry's a licensed building official and a licensed architect. And that's very helpful, just to basically create some time frames where I can do some plan review and some administrative tasks as opposed to just inspections.
Okay. Well, today we're talking about residential, but I mean, you do everything. You do commercial.
Correct.
So
It's
that's
heating, cooling, everything that's associated with a building, that's in the building code, including some of the fire issues with regards to fire safety and smoke detections and fire sprinklers, et cetera. That falls within the building code. Although commercial, we kind of spread that out a little bit. The fire marshal takes on a good responsibility with a lot of the fire safety things in commercial buildings. But residential, it's substantial and it's changing. there's, as you know, the homes and what they put into them, the technology is increasing just like every place else, and it's interesting, but it's not always easy.
Right. The question is, who should pull the permit once you decide that you want to do a project? Who's responsible?
That's a great question, because most people believe that it's the contractor's responsibility. The contractor is acting as the owner's agent in all cases. So primary responsibility is the owner of the property to get permits, inspections, etc. They can delegate that to the contractor as their agent. And there's a process for that, and basically on each application it says I am the owner and or owner's agent. It's an affidavit. So that is principally the owner, and sometimes people believe that, oh, I hired a contractor, I didn't have anything to do with that. That really isn't the legal answer.
Right.
Okay. How do you find a qualified contractor?
That one, I can give less direction on that as a building official. I can give recommendations in the sense that, you ask family, friends, people who have had work done with them, Better Business Bureau, realtors, can be a real asset because they're familiar with the people who do work in the area. References are great to have. The Department of Consumer Protection has a website, tells you what you need in a contract, and you make sure you meet all those requirements. And that really helps you. And there's a fund that's available. So if, for instance, you had a bad contractor, you had a legal issue with them, you couldn't get any money from them, there's a fund that you can get to at the state level to get some of your money back if there's a real problem. So that's available to you, but it's not available to you if you didn't have the right contract, and there's some things that fall into place there.
So after you've gotten the permit, somebody comes in and has a plan, and they submit that, and you give them the okay. When do you go out and do the final inspection, or what is the process there?
Typically, depending upon what they're doing, there are a number of inspections, or just a single inspection, depending upon what you're doing. If there's a question, we come out at any time before you start. Typically, for instance, an addition, the hole is dug and the planks are in there to form the footings. And so there are a number of inspections, and on each application we'll tell you what permits or what inspections are required for that specific permit. Some are very easy. You're going to do a new boiler, it's the final. It's one inspection. Sometimes it's two. Gas conversion, we'll do the gas test, the underground gas, potentially two, and then the final inspection when it's completed. But that varies depending upon the situation. But it can be as little as one or as many as 30 or 40.
With a new home, what should a person anticipate with that?
There's a minimum of 7 inspections, and more likely 9 to 10. And some of them are a little bit, again, an example is how building codes are changing is the energy codes are more stringent, so that there's actually a separate energy requirement, not just insulation, a checklist and some requirements for infiltration. And in the new codes coming up, there'll actually be things like blower door testing. You'll have to test your ductwork the way you test your plumbing to see that if it leaks.
But you can't go to the next step until the prior step is inspected.
Correct. We give some flexibility on that in the sense that if we can see what needs to be corrected after the insulation, then go ahead and insulate as long as we can see what the correction is. But until that correction's made, you're right.
Okay.
The other question here was, does a contractor have to have a book of Simsbury building codes and Canton building codes so that they know if they're working here they have to do things differently?
No, actually, that's kind of a misconception, and you'll hear some contractors lament, oh, it's different at every town. Well, sometimes it's different in how it's interpreted or enforced, and I can agree with that. It's not supposed to be. Connecticut has a single building code, and they're required, no town can make it more stringent. There is no ability for any town to make a building code more stringent. You can apply things that are specific to the town, wind speeds, flood zones. Those are specific to that town. You can apply it, and there's actually charts in the back of the building code for each town. Tells you the wind speed, the seismic zones, etc. But one code, one town. It's based on the ICC, the International Residential Code Model Code. Connecticut modifies that with some things from this thing called the Connecticut Codes and Standards Committee. in association with the state building official and state fire marshal, create a supplement. So anything that's specific to Connecticut goes into that supplement. I just finished a 3-year period where I was chair of that committee, which was quite a big deal for, a building official hadn't chaired that committee in, I think, 20 years. So it's a 21-member committee, and engineers, architects, public constructors, public members, energy code experts. So it's a number of people that are very qualified. It's an interesting and very educational.
Right. There was one thing just before the show you talked about was oil tanks. Is that
Right.
That's a little different in Simsbury?
A little different in Simsbury. Thanks for bringing that up. Simsbury is actually the only town that has a underground oil tank regulations and ordinance. And they did that because we have an aquifer in the center of town that really feeds an awful lot of people. And it's very important to the town. So the town wanted to put in extra requirements to protect that aquifer. So they made this ordinance, and first part of that was registering all the oil tanks, and the other part of that is when you take them out, it requires inspections and permits, and there are a number of other things for containment. So it is different, and most of the contractors are aware of that, but not all homeowners are aware that, am I in this zone? Am I not in the zone?
Is it completely all of Simsbury? Or
No, it is
just,
not. It's just a section of Simsbury is in the aquifer protection, but that regulation applies, or ordinance applies, to homes with private wells. Because obviously you wouldn't want to have your oil tank leaking into somebody else's or your own well.
Right.
Even if it's not in the aquifer.
Right.
Okay. One thing that comes up a lot with us is smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. Can you tell us about that?
I can help you out on that, because that's a really important, and I would say that of all the regulations, that one saves an awful lot of lives, just having smoke and fire detection. So it's really important to have updated and to take care of your smoke. And it is actually the only retroactive building code. So retroactive means that if you put in an addition, the addition has to meet today's building codes. The rest of the house does not, with exception of smoke and fire detectors. You have to retrofit the house with smoke and fire detectors in the location. They don't have to be hardwired, but one at every level and one in every bedroom. So in each and every bedroom has to have a smoke detector. At every level of the house, outside the bedrooms on the top floor if you have a colonial, the first floor, and the basement has to have a smoke detector. The ones at every level have to be carbon monoxide as well as smoke detectors. You could have two, or you could have one combination. That's your choice. But one at every level, one in every bedroom is required whenever you take a permit. And now I understand that under the real estate law, which I can't enforce, that's part of the transaction requirements in a real estate transaction. So that gives you the level of importance that the legislature saw that this was pretty important for the people in Connecticut.
Yeah, and I have to say that I thought I knew the rules, and I did not. And we just had it at our office meeting just a couple weeks ago, and we were on the wrong side, we did not understand the rules correctly. So we were even probably telling our clients probably the wrong thing. So.
And I think it's fairly straightforward in Connecticut when you kind of think about that. I will give you the exception, because there are always exceptions. If you have a house that's all electric, there are no combustion, then you don't need a CO detector. Kind of makes sense, because I don't have anything that creates CO. Why do I need a detector?
Right.
So.
Well, thanks for clarifying that for us and letting us know that we definitely need a detector in every bedroom, a smoke detector.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Should we go to bedroom?
Yes, we should.
Okay, another thing that happens in real estate, but I think a lot of people who might be adding on or changing the configuration of their house, what qualifies as a bedroom?
That one is not, it seems like a straightforward question. Of course, it's a bedroom. The building code looks at it as, if you sleep in it, it's a bedroom. So they're looking at it from a safety point of view. Mm-hmm. Can I get out? Does it have light and ventilation for me? Does it have two ways out? One is the door to the hallway or the front door, or a door to the outside. And the other is a means of egress, either a window that qualifies as the right size, or another door that leads out to the outside. So those are the things that are required in a bedroom. Other than that, the building code doesn't say you need a closet, doesn't say you need anything. You need to label it and call it a bedroom. Many people say, if it's got a closet, it's a bedroom. The building code, if it's got a bed, it's a bedroom. So it's kind of one of those, and the health code is something very different because they have to do, based their septic sizing, et cetera, is
Right.
based on the number of bedrooms. That's one of the things they use to size a system. So they have to make some calls, and some of it's discretionary, some of it's in their regulations and the health regulations, and they try to reference and coordinate building code and health code to make sure it's consistent, but it's not always. So it sounds like an easy question, but it's not always, and you can label something a den and not have it a bedroom, although some people say, well, I have this great room and I'm going to put a bed in there, but it's not really.
A lot of people seem to have bedrooms in the basement. So as far as that goes, what do you need for
That one's kind of, as I kind of alluded to, bedrooms need to have two ways out, and they call that the means of egress. One is typically the main door to get in and out of the bedroom, and that goes to a hallway and out through the front door. The other one is either a window that meets a certain requirement for square feet and availability to get out of it, basically 5 square feet within it's closer to 44 inches and 5.7 when it's above on the second floor and minimum dimensions. And so we can kind of go, but if you had, for instance, a basement that had a bulkhead that opened up into that room, that would qualify as your way out. So that's one way out, and the other door that goes up the staircase, and the staircase has sheetrock underneath it so that it's protected in case there's a fire. That would be another way out, their primary way out. The thing that sometimes catches people on the basement is you have this little tiny window. You don't have light and ventilation requirements for a bedroom with that little tiny window. So you might have a great rec room, you might have something that, well, we all know that the kids from relatives come over and they need a place to sleep, so we put them down in the bedroom in the basement. It gets used twice a year. That's kind of recognized, but it's not formally or ever supposed to be a bedroom unless you have those elements, that you have the means of egress, light and ventilation.
Right. And that's exactly a house that we've just been talking about in the office. So.
And there's also height requirements, right?
There are in basements, for finished basements, and actually Connecticut gives a little bit of a break compared to the national code. The national code is 7 feet in a basement. Connecticut is 6'10", and the way the code is phrased is that projections can go 6 inches into the required headroom. So that means 6'4" under beams and ducts and things like that. And they did that because they got so many requests for modifications. They said, we're granting these modifications at 6'10". Why don't we just make the code 6'10", and then we'll get rid of a lot of this stuff, people coming to the state for 2 inches. And so they basically did that. And that's worked out pretty well for the state of Connecticut. But that's a minimum headroom. And from a perspective of people say, well, I'm going to finish this basement. Sometimes they don't have 6'10". It is not a basement that can ever be finished. So people are sometimes, well, I'm only 5'2". I don't need to have 6'10". What do I need?
Exactly
6'10"
my
for?
case.
So, but the reality is that whoever moves into the house is meant for someone who moves in, and they had to pick a number, so they picked 6'10" as the number, and a heat source, insulated envelope, all the things that make a living space a living space.
All right. And as we're talking about heights, now in a dormered cape, there's 5 feet is anything less than 5 feet is not counted as square footage, right? Correct?
Correct. So if you had a sloped ceiling and the sloped ceiling went down to the floor, you could do that. The actual square footage that you count as occupiable area doesn't start until the headroom is at 5 feet. Then you can start counting square footage. Doesn't mean you can't have that square footage. You could make it down to 30 inches or 24 inches and put your dressers in there and that kind of, and that's okay. But you wouldn't count that as actual occupiable square footage. And it's consistent with what the assessor does for square footage and when they count how much square footage is in a house. They do pretty much the same formula.
Okay.
Another thing that when we were prepping for the show, after the big storm a couple years ago, generators became. I have to say that when I go in a house now, I think it's unusual that I found a house without a generator hookup. I know there's automatic ones, and then there's the ones that you keep in the garage. What are your comments and
We do
safety?
an awful lot of. We do. I would say not every generator, because some of the people had just put them in and did their own wiring, but that's less common. The most common is that permits and inspections are done, and we've done hundreds and hundreds of those. Some of them are automatic transfers, some of them are manual transfers, some of them have things called an interlocket, and some of them have a meter, and there are a number of things. But one anecdote I'll share with you with regards to is labeling. Automatic generators, the meter's supposed to be labeled. And I had a very good professional electrician doing a solar installation, and he was working on the meter and to do a line side tap, and he was there, and all of a sudden the garage door opened. He was very surprised, to say the least. The automatic generator had kicked on the opposite side of the house. He couldn't hear it. The conductors he was working on were now live from the generator. So that labeling, had it been on there, would have prevented him from potentially having a heart-stopping experience.
Okay.
Great.
As far as generators, we also discussed electrical panels, and there's a specific electrical panel which Ed and I both had an experience with within the past 6 months. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. There's older electrical panels typically have to take a look at, but specifically one of them, Federal Pacific, has had kind of a bad reputation for servicing. And basically some of the connections can be loose, and they've had some failures. And most of the time when an electrician or an inspector comes in, they'll recommend, if they see Federal Pacific, they'll make a recommendation to replace it. Because one, it's older, because it is Federal Pacific and they haven't been around for a while with those panels. And two, because they've had a bad track record in some cases. So if you do have one, then it's probably time to take a look at it. An electrician can check connections, etc., but it's probably not, electrical equipment doesn't last forever.
Okay.
I think with time permitting here, I guess one of the things to ask you about is what's going on in Simsbury right now? Is there some new builds going on?
There is. Over the past probably 4 years, Simsbury has changed in the type of activity that you've seen. Used to be used to having single-family homes and some developments and then some commercial, but it's changed. It's shifted. We have a number of multifamilies. Some on West Street, you may have noticed that. There are some townhouses as well as the apartments there. Those are essentially complete, the apartments. The townhouses, some are still in construction. Dorset Crossing has 168 units that are under construction. I was just there this morning doing some inspections, as well as a 48-unit fully accessible. The unit in the back, those are 48 units. Those are very energy efficient. They meet a high standard, and they are fully accessible, meant for multiple sclerosis people. So, there will be some interesting construction details, I'll put it that way, on that project. There are a number of projects that are already approved that are coming up. They probably will start the Big Y, which is, a grocery store. There are a number of units in the center of town that were approved. The mansion is going to get changed over to potentially 6 or 7 units, then potentially 30 units behind that. With a demolition of the small area behind that. We've got approval of another, I think, 160 or 180 units on the south end of town. Proposals for the CL&P site that may have some development there with several hundred units in that as well. Powder Forest has another approved that they've started some excavation and but not had any permits. Ethel Walker has their Centennial Center that started. They've started clearing and doing, that's a pool and gymnasium and athletic center.
Right.
Cobb School has a gymnasium that they're under construction now. Westminster had finished several dorms and have proposals potentially this year for another one, but we'll wait and see on that. So those are the types of things, as well as about $15 million in construction for residential. And that's a mix of remodeling, additions, renovations. And Simsbury last year did about $46 million in construction, about 42 the year before, 37, I think, somewhere. Don't misquote me on that, but it's substantial amount of construction each year with about 2,000 permits per year and about that many inspections.
That sounds like job security.
It is.
Keeps you busy.
Well, I think if you think about it all at once, it's a little unnerving. But taking in steps and coordinating, as long as they don't come in all at once. If they come in all at once, I'm going to be busier than I would ever. It would be very difficult to handle that. But one after another, as long as we can keep it consistent and get the ground rules and do good plan reviews and good teams on the ground makes a difference.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for making your television debut here with
welcome.
us. And, you know, I think we just touched on so many things because you're a wealth of information, so I hope you come back.
Thanks.
We
I'll
would
be
like
happy
you
to.
And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.